One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. I know I say this all the time, but I get so excited when I find other people that are just as nerdy about podcasting and marketing as I am, because it makes me feel like I'm not so extra. Like, can we just call it that? Maybe that's how you are. Like, you feel super passionate about the message that you're sharing, and you're like, I just don't know that other people get how much I love this. Well, today's guest is on the same level with me as like just loving podcasting, loving content creation, loving talking about strategy and marketing and building a business. And I am just so delighted to have Traci DeForge today on the episode because we had so much fun. So Traci is someone who is very unique in that we have not had anyone like her on the podcast before. I know, with over 450 episodes that we've recorded, that's pretty shocking, right? That we can still find people that have an expertise or a very unique strategy that they're using for their podcast. That is exactly what Traci is bringing to the conversation today. Because with over 3 decades of experience in broadcast media, executive management, and Fortune 500 business consulting, Traci is the founder of Produce Your Podcast, a premier podcast consulting and production agency that incorporates podcasting into the digital marketing strategy of B2B and B2C companies. With a diverse career spanning startups to Fortune 500 giants like Google and Hilton, she's renowned for business development insights that drive innovation. And I had the pleasure of just exploring her whole journey, and you're going to hear it unfold in today's episode, but having a background that really incorporates radio and behind the scenes of like ad spend and what that looks like, not only for you as a creator, but also for what are these companies looking for, right? Like, what are these bigger companies that you want to collaborate with or partner with or be an affiliate for, like whatever that relationship looks like. And so I was so excited to really explore this topic. Like, I just feel like and we said it multiple times. Traci, you're going to come back. You're going to come back because there's 7 more hours of content that we could create together. So I will not make you wait any longer. Here's my conversation with Traci. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? Right, Profit Podcast listeners, we have a special guest today. So welcome to the show, Traci. How are you today?
I am so great, Crystal. Thank you so much for having me on. And I get to talk about my most favorite thing, which is podcasting to a podcasting audience and a person who loves podcasting as much as me. So what could be better?
I mean, isn't it so much fun? I have the exact same reaction whenever I know someone is just as passionate and nerdy and geeky and loves all things about podcasting and content creation, but also is someone that's been in the industry for a while. Like, I think that this is the big thing. So tell the audience a little bit about your own podcasting journey and how long you've been in the business.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I know recently someone called me a pioneer in the podcasting industry, and I was like, no, that's just you saying that I'm old. But no, I'm not old. But I have been doing this for a long time. But the precursor for podcasting for me was broadcast radio. And I spent the majority of my career in broadcast radio, primarily on the media management side. I actually, before I left to start my own business, I was running the operations of 12 radio stations in the Atlanta metro, which involved all formats, some sports, news talk, country, pop, rock. We produced the University of Georgia Sports Network. And I just have, even before that, just had a massive love for the audio medium platform. I often share the story that I used to sleep with the radio under my pillow, and it was audio storytelling even then because it was ghost stories on an AM radio station. And I just fell in love with radio, calling in, making requests, like all the things. And I was so grateful when I got the opportunity to go to work in broadcast radio right out of college. And that was such a great catalyst for me professionally in so many areas. It led to me ultimately starting my own business. And I did a lot of business development strategy with startups, entrepreneurs, and ultimately Fortune 500 companies. And I share that to say that when I decided to start my first podcast, I was in the process of working with Weight Watchers International on a project around their in-person meeting model. And it just gave me this it was an amazing experience to work with them. But what also was amazing is just it really triggered my idea for my very first podcast, which was Journey to There, exploring the intersection between personal and business growth. And when I decided to start my first podcast, you have to understand I knew a little too much about what it was going to take to produce a broadcast quality radio show as a podcast. So I pulled a team together and launched my first podcast. And then right after that, when this was in 2015, in 2016, right after that, I launched Produce Your Podcast, which is my company that I run today. We're 9 years in, and we're a full service podcast production marketing agency. And we focus on business development strategy for our podcasters. So all of that to say, it all came full circle.
Oh, I love this so much because I think that you may be one of the first guests that we've had. We've had audio engineers that previously were like music producers, then they found their way into podcasting. But you may be like the first true radio person that has stepped into it's almost like you've leaped into this other medium, having a background in audio. And so with that being said, because you said, you wanted to produce a high quality podcast, there's so many people listening that are like, oh no, this is not me. Like they just kind of went up like, oh, Traci is a pro. Like she is a professional, like she's next level already. And maybe they've have this imposter syndrome that already started. And I'm just curious if you run into that a lot when people find out that you have a background in radio or that you have this, this long-standing career of working with these amazing brands. Like, I want to know, where is the imposter syndrome in your own journey? Like, did you have any moments where you're like, what the heck am I doing? Like, what's going on here? Like, what? Wait, hang on.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's such a fun question. And thank you for asking that. I think for me, first of all, I think as a female entrepreneur, and then also starting and doing cutting edge and innovative things in an industry that wasn't quite ready for it at the time, then I definitely feel like, I don't know. I mean, imposter syndrome, have I had it? Do I continue to have it? Absolutely. I mean, it's even funny because I do all the strategy sessions for our clients. So when you come through Produce Your Podcast, if you don't have an existing podcast, we build it with you from the ground up, and we do the strategy in two ways: business development focused and format and radio not radio show focused, but podcast format focused, along with business development strategy. All that to be said, every single time I show up for a discovery call, even today, after I've been doing this for so long, I'll be like, this is going to be the one. This is going to be the one that I'm not going to be able to make it happen. This is going to be the one where I'm not going to be able to build the show or give the aha or have the light bulb come on. And at the end of every one of my discovery, we call them discovery sessions, but they're essentially podcast launch strategy sessions. I ask for our clients to provide a takeaway from that particular session. And so many times it's really almost more for me than it is for them. Like, I love hearing them say back what their takeaway is, but it also, like, I can exhale at that point. It's like, yes. Okay, they had a takeaway. Yes. I provided it for them. We're good. I can keep going one more day. So I think to say you don't have imposter syndrome would be like you lack self-honesty. But I think in terms of where that parlayed into launching Produce Your Podcast was, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm a visionary. And because of my history in broadcast radio as a medium and as a business, and all the intricacies of running 12 radio stations at the time, at my highest point in my professional career, I just knew what was coming for podcasting. And I especially knew what was coming for podcasting for business owners, because I had the ability, with the knowledge and the expertise, to know that where we are now is where we were going to be, and we haven't even gotten started yet. My challenge was I was ahead of the curve perceptually. So I was having conversations with people who were giving me deer in the headlight look, like, and I'm talking about major broadcast companies at this time, back in 2015 and 2016. And so it was so frustrating for me, because I was like, I was talking about monetizing podcasts and business development tools integration into podcasting before people really even understood how to bridge that gap. And so I feel like now I feel validated, but at the same time, I'm like, we could have been doing this 10 years ago.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Well, I think what's so interesting, like when you're talking about doing things in 2015 and 2016, I started in 2018, and I look at all the tools of 2024 and I'm so jealous. Like, there's no other word to say it. Like, I look at the repurposing, the beautiful, like, we can record in high definition, and we have, video, and we have audio, and it sounds amazing. And with the click of a button, you can do this. Y'all, none of that was around. None of it was around in 2018. Like, Skype may have worked whenever you tried to, like, you
as
had to
backup.
like hope in a prayer that things were going to happen, and you would actually have audio files when you were done recording. Like, that's how we were bootstrapping it back in the day. Was there something from the beginning of your journey like that you're just like, oh my gosh?
So fun that you bring that up, because we were actually one of the first podcast production companies to do remote engineering before remote engineering was a thing. So we're so blessed right now because we're on Riverside right now. It's like you said, it's a click of the button. But when we produced my own show, which was obviously the first one, we honed a technology out of the UK, and our engineer was, because it's somebody that I had worked with in radio since the 90s. So it's somebody I had a very long-term relationship with. We had done a lot of production work together over the years. And he honed a technology and licensed a technology out of the UK that was designed initially for radio broadcasters, but it gave us the technology and the platform to record our hosts and their guests virtually right out of the gate. So when we launched, when I very first recorded my first interview with Journey to There, my co-host was in Fort Lauderdale, I was in Georgia, and our first guest was, I actually have to remember who that first guest was. But anyway, this was, they were somewhere else in the US. And so we actually were very innovative in being able to do that out of the gate. Then when the pandemic occurred, that was so helpful for us because we had already been doing it for several years, offering this remote engineering, because all of our clients, for the most part, they will take advantage of recording with a live engineer in the studio with them. But that was virtually unheard of because the technology didn't exist at that time. But we basically re-engineered other technology that was made for radio into podcasting, and that was a really big leap for us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and I love, you already said this word earlier, is like the innovative approaches to doing it, because like you are, I mean, just hearing you say that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish that we would have been friends back then, because I'd have been like, Traci, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but this is broken. It's not working. And then, as more and more of these companies have come online, like it's just been so fascinating to watch, like in real time, the whole industry evolve. But Traci, I know that you are so passionate about monetization and specifically helping creators, podcasters really get paid for the content that they're creating. So is there something specifically that you've seen in the last 6 months or maybe the last 12 months that you're like, oh my gosh, like this is so innovative. It's such a cool way for people to monetize their content, whether they're a beginner podcaster or maybe a more seasoned one?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that I think, in building that bridge between the advances in technology and where we are with opportunities for monetization, I think the hosting platforms have really stepped into a powerful way into the space, and being able to have not only take advantage of dynamic ad insertion, programmatic ads and things like that, and those work really well for podcasts that have large audiences, like in some cases 10,000 downloads a month or 10,000 downloads an episode, which wouldn't we all aspire to want to be in that level consistently? But what we found is that there's some really specific and low-hanging fruit ways to monetize a podcast for a smaller audience, especially if your podcast is focused on growing your business. So if you are a business owner, if you're a coach, if you're a consultant, if you offer product and service, if you're utilizing your podcast to grow your business, then the first thing that I want to say is that you really do have to have good audio quality and video quality, which is one of the reasons why the technology has made it so much easier. And piggybacking on that is that in addition to that, you have this oceanfront property. Your podcast is your oceanfront real estate to market your own products and services. So a lot of times when people think initially about monetization, they're thinking about the traditional radio model where they have advertisers buy ads and the ads go into the podcast. Well, thinking back, one of the reasons why radio lost its luster was because it oversold multiple commercial breaks and really just oversold everything within the stop sets, that the 10, the 20, the 40, and the 50. Like you were looking at some cases in radio at that, especially during that high peak, of 8-minute commercial sets 4 times an hour. Like that is a lot of minutes, allocated to radio programming. But with podcasting, you first and foremost, before you branch out into bringing other people into your show, look at what you have to offer to your audience. So it's so often overlooked that you have your own inventory, that you can market your own products and services. And you can do that through showcasing testimonials. You can do that through teeing up your own live read within your own show, or having your own recorded show dropped into your show. So I think that's like one of the first things I want to say to people is never underestimate the power of your own property inside your podcast for monetization that you can tie back to an ROI. On a specific story in that area, a lot of people go, well, I just don't have enough downloads. I just don't have enough audience. Well, that's really relative to, and it's all about perspective, because we produce I share the story quite a bit because it's an extremely powerful story about the power of her podcast growing her business. And so divorce attorneys typically, or any attorney is typically, focused on a specific geography. And if you're a divorce attorney, you're niche down to the type of firm that you have, and you're geographically restricted to where you can work with your clients. This particular divorce podcast that we work with, 60% of her customer base comes directly from her podcast. And she knows this because when she meets with them and she says something to them, then they either say back to her, oh, I heard you talk about that on your podcast, or they say something to her, which is so refreshing when someone will say something back to you that they heard you say on a podcast. So that's definitely, and we're talking about, less than 500 downloads an episode, where she's getting 60% of her business from. And so the stats are really, really amazing that 63% of people say that they are more likely to purchase or support a brand that supports the podcast that they listen to. So that's your brand, your own brand, and other products and services. And then secondarily, which we can totally get into as well, is how to monetize that audience by bringing in brands and partners and sponsors when you have a smaller audience, because we're seeing really, really great results with people that have smaller audiences, 1,500 and less, 1,000 and less downloads. And I like to talk about those numbers because I want people to understand that what's possible and not feel like they have to wait to monetize till the right time.
Oh, this is so good. And actually, I do want to stay here for a second, because I think that this is where a lot of the audience is. Traci and I were talking before we started recording, and I said, I think that this audience is split kind of right down the middle of people that are just getting started. And then there's those people that are, maybe you've been podcasting and you're at that like catalyst moment. And you're like, okay, I am ready to monetize. But Traci, they are terrified to flip that on their audience because they haven't really had those skills to monetize up to this point. And now they're like, okay, I think I'm ready. Like I'm ready to bite the bullet, whether it's a confidence piece that they were lacking before and now they have it, or maybe it's they're like, no, my numbers are really solid and I feel like it. How do you tell people or coach them, because they don't know how to go about monetizing if they've never done it before? They're like,
right,
I feel bad. Like I feel bad because I never talked about anything, or my audience expected me to just give this away for free forever. And now I'm asking that, ads and sponsors. Like, do you have any advice for that person that's like, oh, this feels sticky. This feels really awkward to do it at this stage.
Yeah. Wow. I have so much for that. So first of all, I want to kind of highlight what you were saying. So mindset is everything. We talk about it. I know in one of your episodes that you were talking about, with a financial expert, it's like mindset is everything, right? Yeah. And you also have to apply that to your own podcast. So when you're creating your content, you're in a certain mindset around that. And and really embracing that your audience, not only do they come to you and they are engaging with you because of the content that you create, but the more podcasting becomes popular, the more people understand that there are hard costs associated with podcasting. So that's where that high percentage of people, 63, in some cases we've even seen 73%. So that's a pretty significant range, 63 to 73% of listeners of podcasts want to support the host of their favorite podcast because they want to continue to get that information. I think being armed with data is power. So if you've never been a person who made their entire career off selling air, which exactly is what advertising sales are when you're dealing with an audio only platform, especially if you think about it. So you have to make it a tangible experience for yourself and for the potential sponsor that you're talking to. But we do work with, like you're saying, in our sponsorship circle program, we are coaching podcasters who may have never had any kind of business development or sales background before, or if they did, it was in their specific industry and it doesn't really necessarily cross over into branding and sales and marketing, which can be its own beast. So what we recommend, and I use this phrase a lot, which is start where you are. And a lot of that is start where you are with your comfort level, but then also start with where you are with where your show is in terms of really doing a good assessment of where is your show? Where are you right now? And then the third aspect of that is start where you are with your own network, because there are so many people, most people actually, they will overestimate the number of people who know what they do, and they will underestimate the number of people that they know. And I really feel like I want to say that again for emphasis. You have a tendency to overestimate the number of people that know what you do, and you underestimate the number of people you know. And that's important because in this conversation around monetization and sponsorships and monetizing, because the best way to start the conversations about branding or with brands or with or having to talk about someone aligning with you and sponsoring your show is to talk to people that you know and that know you and know the quality of your work, and being able to inspire them to come along with you on your journey because they already know you and the quality of what you do and your work, and they know that aligning with you is going to be beneficial for their products and services in a way. If they can get 63% conversions, the audience numbers go out the window at that point, right? Yeah. So you really have to start where you are with your mindset, data, and get some research and numbers like what we're talking about. Edison's research came out May of 2024. The most current data is accessible. Just familiarize yourself with the power of these podcasting stats, because then you get excited when you're talking to somebody, and it's not about cost per thousand at that point. It's about, I have really amazing, highly engaged, mighty network of people that are ready to do business with you. And here's how I can support you in doing that. So it's like, what's in it for you? So, there's so many different layers to it. And I think with anything, you just have to start with the conversations that feel confident and comfortable for you. And those are typically with people you already know.
Yeah. And I mean, to even take it a step further, like what you were talking about earlier about, because I love talking about promoting your own products and services. I think that is the best way to get started with monetization, and then take those numbers to the brands and the companies that you're working with. And you can say, hey, these are my percentages. Like, these are my data points that I'm already starting with when I talk about my own digital course or my coaching services or whatever it is that you're offering, and showing them, hey, these are the types of results that we can expect. And the whole original model of the CPM just goes out the window, like you're saying. Like, you can offer so much more value. But I'm curious if you have any examples of like a client or someone that you've worked with, or maybe even one of your own shows, where you were surprised by how quickly a brand was like, I don't even care about your downloads. Like, I just want to work with you. Like, they were excited to work with that person, that brand, that podcaster. Has that ever happened for you?
Oh my gosh. So many interesting stories around this. And I kind of want to start with one that's really small. So for relatability purposes, because it was just one of our most favorite client phone calls I've ever received. And she left the most fun voicemail. And it was, the podcast is called PR Maven. And she's based out of Connecticut, again, like very small. Majority of her clients come from her own backyard. And we were working and coaching her through sponsorship, She worked with her to get everything set with her show in order to be ready for sponsorship. And she got the first appointment the first, prospect call. She emailed us like the day before, completely angsty, like, they're going to ask me about my downloads and I don't know what to tell them. And I've got the call and what do I do? And so, we coached her through and said, talk about the value of your audience, talk about how engaged they are with you, talk about your success stories and PR and what you've been able to do for your clients. And then the conversation at that point wasn't about the downloads. It was about the movement of her audience and the tactical ways that she has been able to serve them. And the very next day, she closed a sponsorship, and it was a $3,000 sponsorship on an audience numbers of less than 300 downloads per episode. And so she closed a $3,000 sponsorship on this very first sale that she'd ever had on it. She called and like she was giddy. She was like, "They said yes, and everything you told us worked." And but that's great for us. Like, yes, that's a humble brag, not so humble brag. But what I want everyone to take away from that story is that she had the nerves. She had the angst. She was really like not comfortable going into the conversation, but she felt confident in her data, her numbers, like what she could do as a host and her audience and how she had supported them. And then she was able to communicate that along with her passion and enthusiasm that they bought the sponsorship, and she was off to the races. So that's a literal example of a very small, specific, geographically and niche targeted subject matter that she was able to claim that level of sponsorship for. And then you go to the opposite extreme, which is our NHL wraparound podcast, which just in itself, having the name NHL in it does not hurt. Sports marketing has a tendency to be more enthusiastically received for sponsorship. But this particular podcast did not have anything to do with the NHL in terms of brand affiliation. So they're not, it's not an NHL financed podcast. It's not an NHL endorsed podcast. It's two hosts. One was an ESPN broadcaster in the hockey space, and then the other, the host is Neil Smith, who was the general manager of the New York Rangers at the time they won the Stanley Cup 30 years ago, which was if you're a hockey fan, you know this, but it was just a historic, amazing victory for the Stanley Cup win in 1994. And as a result of that, he has been an icon in the hockey space. So and I love to share this story for people who are like, I'm never going to be able to get sponsors for my podcast. The important pieces are that this wasn't an NHL finance. Like I was saying, there are two guys who have a big brand in the hockey space. But you can have a big brand in your space anywhere. It can be in the tech space. It can be in the interior design space. It can be in the coaching and consulting space. Theirs just happened to be in the hockey space. So when they came to us to launch their podcast, we started talking about monetization out of the gate. They were looking at maybe over the course of 6 to 12 months, they would be able to monetize it. They knew it was a long game. We came out of launch with that podcast with over $20,000 in podcast sponsorship, from personal network relationships all the way up to UBS corporate and a game-worn jersey, very niche specific. Like, they were willing to take a chance. There were so many people that were willing to take a chance on this podcast because they knew Neil's reputation. They knew Vic's reputation. They knew that they were going to, it didn't hurt that they had Wayne Gretzky on the first episode, which I'm not even a hockey person. I grew up in the South where there wasn't ever any ice, for goodness sakes. Not to say that there weren't hockey teams, but in all seriousness, I even knew who their first guest was going to be, right? But again, it was people taking a chance on a podcast that had zero downloads because it had not even launched. And I would even love to even break down their monetization strategy for everybody, because it wasn't just the UBSs and the game-worn jerseys. It wasn't just them that were buying into it. We also had other monetization strategies lined up for them as well.
Yeah. I would love to dive into any more of those, because I know that there's people that are listening right now and they're like, okay, this sounds like the podcast launch of my dreams, being able to have sponsors before I even put this out. But they're also, again, the imposter syndrome is hitting them hard. But I want to go back to what you said earlier. And I love this so much. It's about the people that you know, like, who are the companies? And I thought about this a few times. I have this dream in like all of my free time that I don't have. I'm like, I'm going to create this podcast about Texas. I live in Texas. I love Texas. And I have multiple family members that are obsessed with Texas history. And the first thing that I thought about was, oh, I know like 4 or 5 entrepreneur friends that own businesses that are specific to Texas, and they would love to have a marketing like platform to share their businesses. So I'm just so curious and fascinated if someone's listening and they're like, okay, I need to think about sponsorships in a different way. Do you have any like of the tools and strategies that maybe the hockey podcast used, or other ways that they can go about dipping into their network without things getting awkward? Because again, my audience, they're like, oh, I don't have a sales background. I'm just it makes them feel all squirmy and cringy.
Yeah. Well, I think that the reason for that is all the stereotypes that are associated with quote unquote sales. But here's the thing, podcasters and business owners, if you're not selling, then you're not in business. And so you have to first redefine what your perception is of what selling is. Because selling, in my opinion, is having a conversation like we're having right now that's fun and upbeat and enthusiastic about what we have to offer and the years of expertise that we've invested. Like, we are experts in our own right, and we have the opportunity to have these conversations. So I think you have to like first shift your perspective about, it's not cringy if you do things in a cringy way, they're going to be cringy. Yes. But if you're not a cringy oriented person, I'm not, most people ideally aren't, then you just have to think about it as having a conversation where you're presenting a scenario that's a win-win-win for everybody. Another example of a really great opportunity around podcasting that I want to share has to do with a podcast called Berry Nation. Again, they are very focused, and they have a community that serves people that have experienced gastric bypass surgery, any kind of weight loss, dramatic weight loss surgery. That's their people. That's who they talk to. They have a highly, highly engaged community outside of just their podcast, and their podcast is really great as well. So when we were working with them, they have never had the opportunity to do any kind of advertising sales. It was really kind of a foreign conversation for them. But how we worked with them and really instilled in them is like, look how powerful your community moves when you recommend something, when you have a product that like, there's I've learned a lot about this as a result of producing this podcast, but there's some certain products that are like ride or die products for people who have this type of surgery or struggle with the issues that come along with it, both psychologically and health-wise. So when there's a product that works really well for this community, they are your biggest advocates and your biggest evangelists. So we started working and talking through to them, like, what are some of these products that aren't maybe like the brand name Procter & Gamble brand names? Like, what are some of like the boutique brands that are really servicing this niche? And when we started to peel the onion layer off of and getting into the ability to have conversations with smaller businesses, the overwhelm just dropped significantly. And we did the same thing with the Outdoor Biz podcast. When you think about sponsorships, and I see this happen all the time, and I've been guilty of it myself, it's like an Outdoor Biz podcast. Oh, we should talk to Patagonia. We should talk to North Face. We should talk to Subaru. Well, those would be great conversations to have. But what about the boutique surfboard, artisan craft hiking boots? There's so many cool small businesses that do not have the friction or the red tape or that you can actually connect with and say, I have this mighty community of outdoor evangelists, or I have this mighty community of people who eat your protein bars every single day because it works for them. Wouldn't you love to have that conversation with more people that could engage with your product? And then you're excited, right? Like it's like you're doing something for them. It's not about what the cost is to sponsor the episode or what the downloads are. It's about helping people. And when you can think of sales in that way and it's authentic for you, then that's where the win-win-win comes in.
Yeah. And I love this so much. It's like just the mindset shift. You know, we've talked about mindset so many times today, and it's just like that shift in perspective of offering value and helping everyone involved and everybody wins. Like, I think that is just a way, and then just lean into that authentic thing. Like, cause we all know, like I bet everybody listening right now can think of 5 different things that your audience would love, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, it's just a book, you know, it could be a book on Amazon that you want to recommend. Like, there are so many things that they're the tools that are in your toolkit that you could offer to your audience. And I think that approaching brands and sponsorships that way as well is just going to help you land those deals just many more times than you would without them. But I absolutely love this conversation. Were you going to add something else, Traci?
I was, because I wanted to circle back to what you were saying around like specifically about the NHL and podcast, and not necessarily about pre-launch, but I wanted to talk about special series for a moment, because there was something that you said that triggered me about content creation and creating series. One of the things that I'd love for people to think through is like, when you have an idea to create a special series, think about it in the way that television is pitched, for example. A lot of creators, they will create a pilot, they will have a concept, they will think about a show that they want to take to Apple TV or to Netflix or to the networks, and they're pitching the show. And then once the show gets funded, then the show goes into production. Well, you do not have to be a big NBC, Netflix, Apple podcast executive to apply this theory to your own podcast. If you have a special content series that you think would be beneficial to your audience, a very specific example I'm thinking about is we work with a podcast called Fertility Cafe. We actually launched them 5 years ago, and they're going into season 6. And she is really expanding. She's expanding internationally. She's expanding and doing live summits in person in the US, Australia, in the UK. So she has 5 seasons of this amazing content around surrogacy, around IVF, egg donors, and so what we're working together on is monetizing these special series. So she has enough content that she can repurpose some, so efficiency purposes, she can pull some archived content, repurpose it, bring in some fresh guests, do new intros on some of the repurposed content, but she can build out these very specific fertility-focused special series. But before she's actually going to go to the investment of time, resources, and bandwidth to create these series, she's going to pre-sell them. And that's one of the things where we are seeing a lot of good momentum and traction. You have your regular, maybe you release once a week, maybe you release every other week, and that's your regular episode releases. You can monetize those by putting special segments inside of them, by having people sponsor individual episodes or a bundle of episodes. But then you have this other idea, and this feeds that entrepreneurial, like shiny object syndrome so much. That's why I love it. It's like, oh, I have an idea for a series.
Yes.
And how am I going to make this fit into my editorial calendar? But you can take that shiny object syndrome and turn it into a sponsorship package, have a conversation who might be a really well aligned, like in her case, finance. There's special financing for fertility journeys now. There's, the law attorneys are really focused. That's a heavy law firm focused pathway. So you can have these conversations about, I'm going to create this special series. Do you want in? Yes. Okay, great. You get the green light. Then you produce the series and it's funded.
Okay, I love this so much, and I have like 17 more questions. But one specifically that I want to know is when you say that you're pre-selling them, because I know that my listeners are listening, they're like, does that mean it's baked in? Is that dynamic? Like, what are the actual ad packages looking like for some of these promotional sponsorships that you typically see?
Yeah, such a great question. I'm so glad you asked that because this is just something I eat, breathe, and sleep. And I forget that not everybody just, like, oh, you do that. Okay, great. So what you want to look at, first of all, okay, I have a special series. I really want to, this will integrate into, how to write a book or how to launch a podcast or how to, whatever your products and services are, fertility journeys, finance journeys, like anything, you create your special series around that. Then you're going to want to break it down and say, okay, how many episodes? I recommend in a special series that you have about 5 episodes, like anything, minimum of 3, but you don't really need to go outside of like 5, 7 at the most for this type of, especially if it's your first rodeo with this, right? So let's say you land on 5 episodes in this special series. You can then start breaking down what the content will be and then identifying based on the content what type of experts you could align yourself with for sponsorship. So you might want to have a premium sponsor who would be the person who is the premium. They would have the title series, if you will. We call it the arena rights sponsorship. We don't think you should necessarily compromise the name of the series because of SEO, but you could always say your podcast is powered by, or the special series is powered by. So you have somebody who has presence in all of the episodes there. Then you have the opportunity to have a guest appearance baked into the special series. So if you have the opportunity to be able to bring in an attorney or a finance expert or a certain coach or a certain expert in the industry, part of their sponsorship can include an appearance within the special series so that it's something that's working with them.
So I love it when these things happen in real time, especially with 2 podcast professionals. Of course, we had internet issues and things dropped, but this is the transparency that I love to share on this show. It's like, hey, if this happens to you, it is not the end of the world because it happened to Traci and I. It happens to all of us.
Yes, unfortunately, that is the reality, and which is very helpful when you can just, again, like just not have, I used to say, tech challenges just make me a better human.
100%, 100%. A little bit more patient, a little bit more like, but what you were sharing is you were sharing about monetization and with limited series and really just to round out the whole idea of bringing together companies and brands and the message that someone is so passionate about. Is there one last thing that you'd like to share that could just really help someone shift that mindset, again, because we've talked about it so many times, from I don't know if I'm ready for this to maybe this is something that I should explore?
Yeah. So we were talking about probably like one of the most elaborate sponsorship strategies, which is involved, just to recap in case that our tech issues challenged us. You're talking about the possibility of a title sponsorship. You're talking about the possibility of integrating a guest appearance into a special series and all of the things that go along with that. Those are aspirational levels. Coming back to the start where you are, the best recommendation that I can make for where you are right now, if you're just starting out, is if you don't already have a special segment inside of your show, that start there. So if you at the end of every episode ask a question, what does a richer life mean to you? If you're a financially focused podcast and what does living a richer life by design mean to you? Which was one of our podcasters, we integrated that as a special segment. If you have a special segment, one of our podcasters, Salad with the Side of Fries, does the nutrition nugget. Or, so the first and easiest thing that you can do is create a special segment inside your podcast that is a benefit to your audience that they're going to really love, and start doing that consistently. and then start offering that special segment for sponsorship, because you can, something like that could be sponsored for $250 or $450, and those are easier conversations to have than, do you want to sponsor my special series for $7,500, right? So don't, unless you're just a jump off the deep end kind of person, which some of our podcast clients are, and they're like, let's go for the 20K, right? But just start small so that you start getting the kinks out, because a lot of the other things that you have to think about is the sponsorship starts when you close the sale. So we've talked a lot about like what it takes to have the conversation, to pick up that 100-pound gorilla phone or send that 1,000-pound keyboard email. But then once you sell it, you also have to service it, right? Yeah. So that's why I want to say, like, start with a small little special segment, get that sponsored, then get episodes sponsored, then get it powered by sponsored, then do a special series. Like, just work your way into it like with anything else.
Oh my gosh. Like, Traci, I feel like we could talk for 7 more hours about this, because like we said earlier, I love finding people that can just talk podcasting, and we could just go so many rabbit holes. Like, there's so many opportunities, and maybe we'll have to have you back on the show again, because this was just
anytime.
So much fun. But I do want to wrap up today's episode with our 3 rapid fire questions that we ask all of our guests. So are you up for those?
I am always up for a rapid fire question.
Okay, awesome. These will be a lot of fun. I can't wait to hear your answers for this. The first one is, what piece of advice would you give to a brand new podcaster or content creator?
Keep going. Keep going. Hashtag keep going. Like, it's like, just keep in mind that starting a podcast is like starting anything. It's like starting a fitness routine. It's like starting a diet. It's like starting a business. It's a start of something. The beauty is in the beginning, and it's fun and it's exciting, but the rewards and the impact and the ripple effect all come as a result of just keep showing up and keep doing what you're doing, and just, keep going.
Oh, I love that. The next one's a 2-part question. The first one is, what is the dream podcast you would love to be on, and who is your dream podcast guest you'd love to interview?
Oh, that is so unfair. Because oh my gosh. The dream podcast that I would like to be on. But I would just like to hang out with the guys that do SmartList. Like, they don't have guests. But because I'm such a producer, like, for me to, like, that's who I want to be in the studio with, right? Like, I don't 100%. Know that I want to, like, I don't think I'm a fair person to answer that question, because my mind goes to, who do you want to hang out in the studio with? And like, that would just be like, I can't even imagine how much fun that would be to hang out with them in the studio while that show's being produced. And what was the second part?
So that's your dream podcast you'd love to be on. And then who is the dream podcast guest you would love to interview?
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Man, there's so many. Who is the podcast guest that I would want to interview? Okay, this is so radical and bizarro, but this is what came to my mind. So I would like to interview Jelly Roll's wife, Bunny, that does the Dumb Blonde podcast.
I love this.
I have a passion for the music business, being in radio for so long, and I've followed his trajectory through, and he's, they are controversial to a degree, but at the same time, like, I would really like to interview her, because I believe in my heart that she is as authentic as she comes across, and I just want to see it for myself.
I love this. I love the indulgent answers here. And by the way, SmartList has been listed so many times that people are like, I'd love to be on SmartList. And it's the same reason. It's like just to hang out with them. It's the first time we've had Jelly Roll's wife on here, though. So you're very unique in that answer.
Yeah. Okay. Bunny from the Dumb Blonde podcast. Yeah, she's doing some really interesting things with her show. So
I love that. Okay, my last question is, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
I consider myself to be a recovering perfectionist, because I have seen firsthand of how it has held me back, been destructive in my own personal and professional hurdles, and it's just something that has been an absolute nemesis, Achilles heel for me. And I think a lot of that comes back to being really young in a broadcast career, being female, being Southern, having to just really just work so hard to strive, being management at a really young age, and just overcoming and like just thinking, it's perfectionism is a perceived element of control, but you don't have control. So as soon as you can accept that and realize that it's really about perfectionism also creates a tremendous amount of procrastination. I think once you understand perfectionism, it loses its luster. So yeah.
I love that. And such a great answer. And like I said, Traci, we could talk for 5 more hours just about this. This was so much fun. But if people are listening, they're like, yeah, I think I want to work with Traci. I think I would love to learn more about what she does. Where can everyone learn more about what you do and how they can connect with you?
Well, the best way to connect with me is to go to our website, which is produceyourpodcast.com. And you can connect there. There's a lot of great videos from clients telling the stories like I shared with you today, and you can book a call, you can fill out the contact information, you can learn more about our sponsorship circle coaching program and all of those things. But everything is really robustly laid out at produceyourpodcast.com.
Awesome. And we're going to have links for that and just some other fun ways that you can connect with Traci and learn more about all the cool things that she's doing. But thank you again for being on the show today. This was so much fun.
Thank you. It was just a blast.
Wow. I mean, it was just such a fun conversation. I loved meeting Traci, and we were both like, how have we not crossed paths before? And shout out to Angie. So Angie Trueblood, she made the introduction, and she's from the Podwise group. And she was like, you need to have Traci on the podcast. Like, how have y'all not met before? You need to connect with her. And I'm so grateful that she did, because this conversation was, again, just so fun, minus, our little technical glitches, but that's fine. It happens. And that's why we like to talk about it and say that, even those of us that have been doing this for a long time have the technical hiccups, and it's just funny how it just happens to be the time when it's like, oh, it's 2 podcast experts and then we have issues. Yes, we do too. So quit being so dang hard on yourself whenever you have issues, because it happens to all of us. But make sure you go check out Traci and the awesome things that she's doing over at Produce Your Podcast. You're going to find links to everything in the show notes, so make sure you go check them out. But that's all I have for you today. So if this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow wherever you are listening. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.